3 meaty reports. I don't want this meeting to go beyond 8:30. I think that's the absolute outside. Nor do I necessarily want to fill that time until 8:30. So I think for the 3 main items, I will aim to have a limit, 20-minute limit on discussion. But I do, in my introductory remarks, want to make 1 or 2 comments. First of all, I think we've had 3 very interesting and comprehensive reports by 3 working groups, and I have to say, Councillor Sampson, that you were actually officially part of the working group.
I'm not.
But I don't want to get into a procedural muddle about those, which were initiated by this committee. But I would like to remind this committee that working groups are not committees, and that is something very clear in the terms of reference of working groups. Working groups do not make recommendations directly to the council unless they were set up by the council. The terms of reference for working groups state, and I'm quoting from the terms of reference, the final report of the working group should contain clear options for action and recommendations for resolution by the body that established them. So, in other words, working groups set up by this committee report to this committee, and the committee then has the opportunity to consider the options laid out by the working groups, and the committee makes the recommendations for action to the council. So recommendations made by a working group are not set in stone. They are for discussion by this committee, and that is a sensible way of proceeding, to my mind, because it allows the committee to look at a wider remit than a narrow remit of a working group. So having delivered that lecture, I will now turn to the second item on the agenda, which is apologies. Thank you.
A report from Councillor Friend, who has BBC work.
Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Receive any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests from members in respect of business to be transacted on the agenda. Yes.
I was expecting to declare an interest for the schoolhouse, but we seem to not want to talk about empty buildings.
No, I left that off the agenda because I thought this is enough for this week. Do you want, I mean...
I can't read it now.
No, okay.
We'll catch up others later.
Yeah, thank you. Item 4, public participation. 15-minute session is set aside. Do we have any? So, Christina's on. Oh, right, Christina, sorry.
Good evening. I'd like to update the committee on Guildhall Bus Stand B, recently moved to the corner of Cattle Market. I addressed the council in January, highlighting the danger to road users and pedestrians caused by restricted visibility when buses are parked at that junction. Many residents feel the new arrangement is unsafe, but inquiries met with an array of confusing responses, which I won't read, but I've given you a few examples. I submitted freedom of information requests to DDC and KCC for all planning and approval documents, including traffic surveys, risk assessments and safety audits, and received only the road safety audit in response, which failed to recognise the risk of buses pulling out, the risk to pedestrians crossing the road between the old HSBC Bank and the Guildhall, and risks associated with the one-way sign outside the waiting room being obscured by tall lorries. That said, the road safety audit did observe a bus waiting for an extended period, recognised that would restrict visibility, and requested the bus stop to be moved further away from the junction. The KCC designer and the DDC sponsor declined the auditor's advice, saying that cars will creep beyond the giveaway to further aid visibility, and that DDC will ask Stagecoach to manage where the buses sit when they are idling, as the bus only needs to sit at the most westerly stop, when there is no bus at the primary stop needing to pull out. From observation, the proposed solution does not appear to be working, perhaps due to insufficient raised curb availability, because they haven't put the raised curbs in for the buses to be able to do that basically. Whilst the road safety audit is interesting, it is not a substitute for the missing planning and approval documents. Of particular interest is that the bus lay-by in the approved DDC planning documents runs the full length of the old lay-by, whereas the drawing in the road safety audit shows it considerably shorter. The works appear to have followed the unapproved drawing design. There must be more planning documents both at KCC and DDC. Therefore, KCC are now holding an internal review and DDC have gone back to look for more documents. Of particular note is that the proposal from Councillor Wiles and Councillor Marie to extend the bus lay-by to accommodate 2 buses seems to be almost exactly what had been approved in an earlier plan, which was amended for reasons unknown. Also of note is that the move of the bus stand was not a last-minute decision as suggested by some, because plans must have been drawn up early last year for them to be audited in May. So why present it as a temporary arrangement in September and October? Was it because the sponsor had doubts about the design? And I've got a copy of the road safety audit here that I got from the Freedom of Information, which I'll give to myself and Marcus. I put where the comments are. Thank you. Oh, let me give you a copy of this.
Right, so I think we move on to item 5, which is the report of the Tourism Information Working Group. Councillor Wiles, if you would like to introduce this, I do think we should have some discussion about it.
Thank you. Yeah, the report, I hope, speaks for itself. I've done quite a lot of work on this, but obviously not enough. Just a couple of issues within the report which I'd like to bring up. First of all, in section 6, what does the public think? So I sent out letters to around 90 businesses in the town and organisations, the Sandwich Society, the Local History Society and so on, and had a number of responses which were attached in the appendix. But in the report here, the pie charts, the tags against the numbers haven't come out in the report for some reason. So question 1, does Sandwich need more tourists? 77% said yes. In the Survey Monkey report, and this we had about 130 odd responses to that, which was very encouraging. 13% said no and 12% don't know. So over 3/4 of people who were surveyed said that Sandwich needs more tourists. So I think people in the town recognise the need for more visitors, for the money that they bring, and the vibrancy that they bring to the town. Question 2, should the Visitor Information Centre in the Guildhall stay where it is or move to a new location? 25% said it should stay where it is, 69%, so over 2/3 said it should move to a new location. And most of those people who said it should move to a new location, over a half said it should move to its previous location at the front of the Guildhall. I mean, clearly since it moved away from that location, other issues have intervened. So we've had issues of weddings and the bus stop now outside, which perhaps detracts from a possible tourist office being in that location. There were other ideas about where it could move to, St Peter's Church, to a pop-up kiosk, or perhaps to a retail unit, but moving to the previous location was the favoured response from a majority of people. So just moving on with that. I mean, I've outlined issues that are wider than a traditional tourist office. So many people in the working group made the point that for younger people in particular, a physical tourist office is a bit old hat. Most people now in the younger generations use their phones when they go into a new place. They don't expect to see a tourist office. They use apps, they use TripAdvisor and Google Maps and all that kind of thing to see where they're going and navigating and so on. So late in the day, the issue of the museum came up. So I know there's been some responses to that, but it was a kind of late call in the sense that the museum is there, it's staffed by volunteers, and we'd always had the idea that the new location of any tourist office would be staffed by volunteers, as it is in other places like Broadstairs, with a volunteer coordinator, or sort of manager or officer in charge of the overall tourist office, but who would be recruiting volunteers, making sure the place is staffed. So the thought of the museum came up because obviously it's staffed by volunteers now, and it clearly does perform a kind of tourist office role in any event when the visitor information centre is closed, because people go in there and they ask questions and they pick up leaflets. So doubling up on that seemed a kind of sensible approach, subject to obviously the space constraints and the ability of that to work. So that at section 11 we set out the options of where it could move to, and the recommendation is that we go for a kind of hybrid solution which involves perhaps a smaller physical tourist office either in the museum or the front of the Guildhall, but with outstations, so you have a more proactive approach with an officer in the council who's making sure that the pubs and the retail units are stocked up with leaflets, that we perhaps have electronic boards at the 3 or 4 places where people enter the town, so the Quay, the station, the Guildhall car park, maybe Gaze and Salts car park. So, and then obviously alongside that we need to update things like the signage and the historic notice boards which are in hand with BBC, and perhaps look at the Tollbridge Fund investing in additional signage so that we get a better connection between the Quay and the town centre in particular. But I think my overall conclusion with this is that we have been rather ambitious with this approach, and I think at this stage we don't really have the councillors or the staffing situation that can implement this. I think it's probably premature to take this through at the present time, given all the other issues we have going on. So my recommendation is to say that this is a kind of starting point. We've put down the marker, we've done the research, we know what needs to be done, but we need to do more work with the physical move, if that's feasible. We need to do more work on whether the museum is feasible, and the issue with you've seen the comments from a few of the volunteers, whether that's feasible with the museum, whether it's feasible with the front of the Guildhall, and really we need to wait until I think after May when we'll have a more stable situation, when the situation with councillors will be more stable, and when the situation with the staff will hopefully be more stable, and we can actually have people within the building who can take this forward. So that's my recommendation, that we sort of kick this into the long grass for now, and wait for things to improve.
Yes. Councillor Saxon or Councillor...
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the tourist information, well, it wasn't tourist information, it was police officer or magistrates brought that building at the front, that annex at the front. And then when the magistrates brought something at a spare room, I think town clerk would put it on. But when we first started having the tourist information centre there were paid employees, 7 days a week, 50% paid by Sandwich Town Council, 50% paid by Pfizer's Limited. And then when Pfizer started shutting down their operations, we kept it going, and Sandwich Town Council took over the payments of the 2 ladies that were employed there. It was open for about 6 or 7 months of the summer. So there's no tourist information through the winter months. And that's when the decision was made to, as though the district council were moving out that far into the building, to move the desk in the foyer down there. And so when we first came there, that was staff 7 days a week by paid staff. And what we did, we had someone Monday to Friday, and then we used to have someone just do weekends. Started off, it was like a student at university all week. It wasn't even when the Britain's Brexit kicked in, so everything, it's all been mucked up. So in that, nothing actually come back together again. But that's what it was originally done, and also the clerk that was there Monday to Friday did extra clerical work, did the bookings for the Guildhall, the weddings, half or higher, and that's all really good. So they're just paying someone to sit at the front, or two against them once a year, they actually had extra, but I think we should defer the staff to the extra line.
It's certainly the case in the Broadstairs kiosk is they get sponsorship from some of the bigger local employers like Checking, who own the Albion Hotel. So that is another thing they could think about.
And also it gave security down there, because there's someone sitting on desk there, they're watching the building, not who's in and out, they keep the register, not the fire register. You're supposed to sign in and out, aren't you?
Yes, but the problem is the Guildhall isn't open at the weekends. So.
No, the upside originally it was.
Yes, but it,
Yeah, it was, we did have staff there 7 days a week.
yes. Councillor Sampson, and then I want to.
Yes. So I think it's a really good report. Thank you for doing this brilliant work. What was it? Just a quick update on telephone boxes. So the one, raised the item for Larkspur Council, was chatting to the volunteers the other day, and the one between the waiting room and Aussie's, hopefully they'll be starting very soon.
That's excellent news.
So as soon as it's done, I'll share lovely photos with everybody. But that's going to be great. What was it? Yeah, so I think we've kind of identified that we need to sort of just look a bit more into it. The only thing I'd say is we definitely need to speak to the staff, like the museum coordinator, etc. But yeah, otherwise really interesting. It's good to see what people say about it.
I mean, just to clarify on that, I did have an email exchange with the museum coordinator early in January about the front of the Guildhall. So that was always on the agenda because I wanted to check what the legal status was in terms of the grant that we had or not had, and whether there was a legal agreement that had to be used, which doesn't appear to be. I mean, the museum thing only came up later in the discussion, so I had emailed her last week about that. But actually, Clive Hancock, who we all know as Hank, I mean, he's not an unbiased observer, but he has actually made an interesting point about the town sergeant's office, which has a door onto the square. So, that is a sudden possibility that's come up in my mind, because it's visible on the square. When the square is done, it could well be a door, with a tourist information.
Because that actually is another point. I want to follow up with Councillor Sampson about telephone boxes, but the first thing I want to say is I observed all the working group meetings, and I did find them very useful and very interesting, and also the large number of public, both commercial and residential, who came to those meetings and were really engaged, and I think it vindicated the working group system actually, and I think this report also, which I think is an excellent summary of what took place. So, having said that I observed all these meetings and enjoyed them, the one thing that was never considered was the hub as a possibility, because it does actually have its own door. So it could, and it joins up with the shuttered, I don't know what we call it at the moment, the inquiry office or whatever, where Kerry sits 3 days a week. So, and actually, when I read the report, I thought, why aren't we talking about the hub as one of these options? Because that might work. That was the first point I was going to make. But the second point I want to make is that I do think that we could now make one recommendation to the council, and that is that they ensure that all 3 telephone boxes are refurbished and used as distribution centres for leaflets.
Yeah.
Councillor Sampson's
So again, we've already got the item was passed by council, so the one between Aussie's and what's it, the waiting room has been passed. If we include that as another thing, it's going to delay volunteers, so that's already been done. But we probably should ask them first before telling them to do the others.
Oh, no, I'm not saying we should tell
But they're very
volunteers.
keen.
Yes, so we might make a recommendation from this work, otherwise we would rather feel that we've got this comprehensive report and we're not doing anything. And I would like to say, let's recommend that we get all 3 telephone boxes refurbished and used. So, Councillor Lyons.
Yeah, I mean, the hub, I don't think ever came up at a meeting.
No, it
My view is it's too tucked away. Everyone says that
good signage.
this is no good because you have to go into the green tunnel, so going through the huge.
Yeah, because people come out of the Catamarket car park.
But I think the phone boxes, I have spoken to Andy Stiles and he said he's keen to do all 3 and that we have a budget for it and he's keen for them to be like mini tourist, things like that can go ahead.
Yes.
I mean, we can go ahead with investigating the electronic display board.
Okay.
It's just the actual, the big one is something we have to put on hold I think for now.
Okay, so Councillor Sipikai, and then I want to have a recommendation.
I'd like to speak first.
Very quickly, this is about telephone boxes, but I believe, and I think it's only you, Stuart and Keith might remember, that we passed a thing to put the second defibrillator on the key in the telephone box.
Yes, we're not talking about that telephone box, we're talking about the 3 red ones.
There's only 2 of
There's
them.
2.
Are there any?
There's only 2 and a new one on the key.
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay, but that's a note because I don't know whether the second defibrillator seemed to disappear.
Right. Well, we need to check that.
We did have 2. No, that's the one on the wall that goes for is the new one.
Well, there's a new one, Bell Hotel as well, and on the Druid Hall.
Yeah, there's one outside both buildings.
So you've got 3. We've got 3.
Oh, we've got loads of these, fire station,
Cab office, co-op.
co-op.
But the one in the cab office was ours, Sandwich Town Council, and last time I heard about it, I asked about it, they couldn't find it. Yeah.
Okay, well, we need to find out about that. But I still think the telephone boxes might be something that we can recommend to the council. Councillor Marie.
Thank you, Councillor. I agree with Councillor Sampson that the report is a very good report. I attended as many as I could.
Could you, I can't.
Sorry, I attended as many as the working group things as I could. It's a good idea. I agree with Councillor Wells. The hub is too tucked away, I believe. You'd lose it. I reckon you'd have less people attend than what you would now. So the other recommendation made at the last meeting as well is possibly after the elections is to reconvene the tourism committee, full tourism committee that the council used to run, to establish the longer term solutions to tourism within the town.
I'll second that, that's the proposal.
Okay. I would like to speak against that because I think one of the things that has been striking about certainly 2 of these 3 working groups is the engagement with the public. And the fact that they could meet very quickly, they could meet much more frequently than a committee normally does. It seems to me that a committee which is based on representation of opinion and has a bureaucratic element to it would slow things up, would depress public participation. And I feel strongly that at the moment the working groups are a public participatory model which is working very well, and that the discussion takes place at this committee, and I think it's a sensible and very well informed discussion because of the report of the working groups. So that's my view, so I would argue strongly against that. So you know how I will vote when we come to vote.
I'm sure you would, Councillor Watson, but I still think that me and Councillor Wells had a conversation after the last meeting to say that we'd get all the cultures, we'd get the Compass Group, the Chamber of Commerce, the events teams, all that kind of thing, and obviously tourist information and the museum involved within that committee. But I still strongly feel that the tourism committee should come
Well,
back.
let's put it to vote. I should remind you that the maximum number of people to be co-opted onto a committee is 3.
Yeah.
Okay, So we have a motion that a tourism committee be set up, which is proposed by Councillor Marie and seconded by Councillor Sampson. All those in favour, please vote. All those against, please vote.
Well, but it did really work before, didn't it?
Do we have any abstentions? Are you abstaining, Councillor Franklin?
No, I was against it. No, I don't think it was, I think what we're doing at the moment is done very well. I think it worked.
Thank you. I think that's right.
I think my comment on that, I mean, I can see where Councillor Marie's coming from, but I think it's the tourism committee, it's almost trying to carry out an executive role, which is not really appropriate for councillors and co-optees to be carrying out that role. It's for officers to be the executives and we're the non-executives. So I think when you have a proactive tourism officer, they can certainly deal with those people, you know, Campus Group and all that, but they deal with them on the basis of I'm the officer implementing the decisions of the
I don't want to reach, I mean, we have now had a vote and we are not at the moment going to set up tourism committee. And I'm sure there will be new issues to be looked at in another working group to which many of the same people will come. In particular, I think we might have a working group set up after the election to look at footfall in the town, which would include looking at the market and so on. I would now like to turn to what we're going to recommend to the council. I would like us to vote on a resolution that the 2 red telephone boxes be refurbished as soon as possible and used as distribution
If I
centres for.
just to slightly amend it, just so that we're covered on all fronts, that the volunteers who are carrying out the refurbishment or restoration and already agreed stuff by full council, and then are supported by officers to a financial extent as well in terms of materials, etc. Just so we've got that all covered rather than having to go back again.
Yeah. Did you get all that, Archie? Okay, so shall we vote?
I think we're talking about all 3 boxes.
Well, the grey one, do we really want? Well, I mean, we need to
We
think
didn't
about
want it, but whoever wanted it.
I mean, it's doing nothing at the moment. It can be cleaned up and improved and have leaflets in there.
Okay.
That's all. It's right next to the map, you know. And
Yes. It won't be treated with the respect that the red ones are. What worries me is that there will be leaflets distributed.
50 years from now, it will be listed.
Who can I ask who owns the grey one? I know we own ours.
We owned it very well for some reason.
BT scheme.
The other 2 are listed, didn't they?
Okay, so all 3 telephone boxes.
But no defibrillator. There seems to
There
be
are
lots.
lots actually.
But there are none in the south. There was one on the Phoenix Centre and the BBC took that away.
Yes, well, okay. So that's the second thing that we're going to do. And the third thing is, I think, we note the excellent and informative report and say that we will be engaging with the museum coordinator and the reception staff and the museum volunteers shortly. Do we want to give a time? I think we need probably to do it fairly urgently. Should we say within the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Is that
What are you going to say?
Well, I would think, I mean, there is a bit of a rumpus going on because they think, you know, they're going to, all sorts of things are going to change and they haven't been involved. And it's clear that I think they should be involved.
Is it the museum volunteers?
Yes, the museum
They
volunteers.
give a little reception, don't they, once a year? Thank you.
Right, I think that's happened.
But don't you think the museum's too small? Imagine
Well,
if 5 people going to see visitor information.
Yes, those are the kinds of issues that we would need to talk about.
Oh, I thought we were going to talk to the museum.
Well, by this report here, 5 out of
They
6,
don't want it.
5 out of 6 of volunteers don't want
Nobody
it because they
wants it.
purely want to concentrate on
Well,
the
I think
museum
we
and
need
not
to
information.
talk. I mean,
There are 20 volunteers, so this isn't.
No, it's not
necessarily
But
representative.
we need to talk to as many as possible, as soon as possible, don't we? And the museum coordinator. Do we need to note that formally, or just?
I
I
think,
would prefer to
I
leave
think
it until after May.
we're going to get the museum committee up again, aren't we?
Yes.
The museum committee, and I think there's only one councillor, we're one councillor short at the moment, so they have to go on to the next month, end of the month council meeting to reform the museum committee, and I think it should be up to the museum committee then to move it all forward.
But we don't necessarily
don't
want
think
this
that
to
will
work.
work.
There are lots of options.
Well, if you're going to talk about taking part of the space of the museum to make children's information, I think it should be go through the children of the museum committee.
Yeah, but it's only one of lots of options,
It's
isn't it?
there are a whole lot of options, and I think we need to talk to
Maybe just to,
urgently.
And I think that town sergeant was brilliant option, never thought of that. They can move into the other little
I'm
office.
not sure about the size of his office. Well, how do you want to proceed? Do you want to say anything to the council, or shall we just leave it at the telephone boxes? Say that we noted and the report, and that we will be discussing it in far more depth after the election?
Yes.
Okay. Is that acceptable to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, vote in favour. Did you get that, Martin? So we will be talking. So we're postponing, are we, any discussion with the museum coordinator and the museum volunteers until after the election?
I think the message I'm getting is that the museum coordinator is ultra busy.
She is.
This is not a priority.
Okay.
So we need to look at how that all works.
Okay. I think from the recording, the volunteers will understand that their concerns have been attended to, and that we do want to talk to them at some point, but we are rather postponing it, I think.
I mean, ultimately, this is about the town. It's not just about individual
Yes.
staff.
Don't let's pursue it. So, are we happy then with the two motions that about the telephone boxes refurbishment, and that we note this report and appreciate its comprehensiveness, and we will be considering its implications after the election?
Yeah.
Okay. So, thank you. Now we turn to education matters. The next item is the waterways report, I think. Yes, report of the Sandwich Waterways Working Group. And Councillor Heaven, if you would like to introduce it.
The first thing to say is that the report that you've read is still only a second draft, because I'm hoping to produce the final draft for the next council meeting on the 27th, is it? And this is draft number 2, which takes into account comments and suggestions by other members of the working group and residents and so on. So it's open again to amendment, including from this body here. This body here might actually resolve some of the issues put forward. Moving on to recommendations and so on, I take into account Councillor Angerson's point that working groups, working parties should make very firm recommendations. And at this stage there are some firm recommendations and others that are tentative.
Actually, I didn't say that. I said working groups should lay out the options, and it's up to the committee to make the recommendation.
Then we're on the same hymn sheet then. One point that should remain, which is different to the last discussion we just had, is that Sandwich Town Council really does not have the power and the responsibility for a lot of this work, unlike discussions about the museum or tourist information. and we're having in a sense to assess and support or not support other bodies and their actions. That is the Environment Agency, Internal Drainage Board, and to some extent Dover District Council. One firm recommendation is that we persist with asking to become members of the Internal Drainage Board, because I'm pretty sure that at some point, at many points, water bodies overseen by the Internal Drainage Board do go through the area covered by Sandwich Town Council. Another firm recommendation is that there should be a councillor, a voluntary councillor, preferably a member of this this committee, who is the single point of contact for all the bodies that do deal with waterways. That is for the Environment Agency, the Internal Drainage Board, and, as has been pointed out, there are significant water courses and water bodies within Gaze and Salts, and therefore it makes sense to coordinate with the Management Committee of Gaze and Salts. There is the point that until now, to some extent, a lot of the work or the responsibility for work on bodies, for example, the rope walk and the butts, has been kind of left to Dover District Council to do the coordinating and so on. Now, if that involved finance, I'm sure many members of this committee would be delighted to leave it all to Dover District Council. The point I'm making is that if there is a body of water, and the rope walk and the butts are those such bodies of water that are not the responsibility of the Environment Agency, because they're not, and are not the responsibility of the Internal Drainage Board, because I discover now they aren't, they are what is called riparian responsibility. They are the responsibility of whoever owns land adjoining the banks. And this council, Sandwich Town Council, owns Cowleeds Meadow and the Donkey Paddock, which are adjoining the rope walk. Dover District Council, of course, owns much of the other side of the rope walk and much further along by the butts. And it seems as if that riparian responsibility that should fall to Sandwich Town Council in the past has tended to go by the by. Now again, I'd point out that maybe that was convenient if cost was involved. If it isn't, then I think Sandwich Town Council should at very least liaise with Dover District Council on further work on the rope walk and the butts, because we have a legitimate and statutory requirement to take such a role. Having personally had riparian responsibility for a watercourse in the town, it was made quite clear that it would be virtually illegal to allow it to clog up, for example, that it was my responsibility to keep it clear and allow a passage of water, although if people know the waters around Sandwich Passage isn't quite the word, it just sits there. So perhaps Sandwich Town Council should take riparian responsibility for at least half of the rope walk and the butts. And if it comes to cost, maintenance of those water bodies, keeping them open, allowing a flow of water, then we ask ourselves how important are those water bodies to the town of Sandwich, and are we prepared to pay out if we need to, because it is our statutory responsibility. One area that we touched on, and which has been added and changed a bit, is an area where Sandwich Town Council also does have responsibility and could have a lot of input, and that is how we use the land adjoining the rope walk, the butts, the bulwark, and then all the way along the waterways, by which I mean there have been detailed proposals for what is called a moat park, which is to link all those water bodies with the path, the trees and so on, including, for example, a signposted tree walk, because there are some significant species of tree along there, and also some trees that are significantly old and may count as what's called champion trees. That is, they are maybe a typical species, but they may be the biggest or one of the biggest of this type in the country. So there could be, for example, a signposted tree walk. On an even grander scale, a suggestion of a signposted walk for the enjoyment of residents and tourists alike, all the way from Fingalsham along the watercourses, particularly the Delph, into the town as far as Brewery Sluice. And that is something that the town council could get involved in, because again, it's this extent to which it's important for the residents. It's a facility for the residents and for visitors to enjoy. And finally, again, for the future, the area along the rope walk, of course, does link up precisely with the Fellowship Walk and the land there, which has been denied planning permission for building, and would therefore make a logical extension to what we would call green open public space around the town, so that, again, if Sandwich Town Council wished to take a greater role in the management of that area of land, again, it would be Sandwich Town Council probably taking on responsibility and cost. But those latter plans, a moat park, a tree walk, Fellowship Walk, are maybe longer term. But in the meantime, short term, appoint a single point of contact for the various bodies, press for interim drainage board membership, and, if you like, assert our responsibility, our riparian responsibility for the road.
Thank you. I've got a comment or two. Councillor Sampson.
All I was going to say is, so if that's a proposal on the table, I would say, yeah, let's do that. So I'll second it. I'd just say that, yeah, we need to commend Councillor Heaven on this report, this draft, work of the working group, as well as the volunteers you mentioned. What was it, the Sandwich Environmental Conservation Group, Sandwich and Blooming Town Team, weeding and clearing the rose beds. And yeah, we have that point of contact. We'll try to get it right to the internal drainage board, point of contact, as you said, and propose it to you until we know the result of the election.
Yes, I'd like to say something, because I thought this was a very interesting report. One point you've missed out is about whether the Delph could be introduced into the long pond, the moat, and I want to come back to that. It seems to me that we should recommend to the council that we pursue the point about representation on the internal drainage board. That's the first recommendation to the council. We should, as a committee, recommend that we do, from this committee, appoint a single point of contact. for the Environment Agency and the Internal Drainage Board. Personally, I would be strongly in favour of opening up the pipe under New Street and introducing water from the Delf into the rope walk and the bus. That the Delf was originally developed for public health reasons in the Middle Ages. We now have another public health reason for trying to get the flow in the moat going, and that's the mosquitoes and the way it looks and the smell. And it seems to me that is wholly justified. I'm looking at one of our spectators, as it were, who should know about this. It seems to me that on public health grounds, there is a very strong reason for introducing Delf water into the moat, and that I would support that and hope that the committee would support it. I agree with you that it does seem to be the case that Sandwich Town Council should take responsibility and has riparian responsibility and should start considering ways of executing its responsibility, and that might take money. But the note that I made to myself was there are volunteers who are currently cleaning up the gardens, doing a fantastic job, organised by Sandwich and Bloom and the Sandwich Environment and Conservation Group. And there are also volunteers, I think, who would be willing to clear the duckweed. I think I'm right in saying. So it seems to me that we should encourage them to apply to perhaps the Tollbridge Fund to get funding to help them in their endeavours. But that might be something. And the final point that I made to myself was that this committee should consider, after the election, setting up a working group to consider how best to advance a moat parkland or a Delf walk, because that seems to be an appropriate issue. Councillor Wiles, then Councillor Secretary, and then Councillor Franklin. Okay. Daniel, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to say one really quick thing, and you mentioned it. The volunteer group, there was quite a big volunteer group before, and it was stopped by DDC, or by Councillor Friend, I believe, for health and safety reasons. Surely if we have riparian... But if you don't drink it...
No, well...
Just carry on.
Okay. Surely now we could contact some volunteers and we can give them health and safety advice.
Yes, I don't know quite how that works, but you're right that there may be health and safety issues.
There are health and safety issues,
Yes.
but there's health and safety issues for everything.
So
maybe we have
yes,
responsibility.
I'm just saying that, that they should have general encouragement, perhaps, to apply. I mean, they may have to put all sorts of policies in place and make sure that they conform to them.
But also,
they may need funding, and we should support them.
yes, but also, could we do that before the election? It just seems like summer's coming, tourists hopefully will
Yes.
come, and it's disgusting, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But the gardening at the Rope Walk is going on apace.
It's beautiful, yeah.
Yes. Councillor Wells.
Yeah, so on the walkabout, which was 3-4 weeks ago, I think, with Pete Dowling from the Internal Drainage Board, I spoke to him about this issue of going into the water courses next to the butts on the road walk.
Right.
And previously we've been told you can't do that because of water goals or health and safety. He's emailed me back and Darren Solly and Keith Watson at BBC to say he doesn't see a problem with that.
Right.
That we can go in, remove the debris. The DDC officers have not come back saying no, you can't do it, so I'm assuming it's all okay to do that. So I think what we were going to do is, with the town team, Sandwich and Bloom, the environment group, is to say let's have a day or a morning where we actually go in with I've got waders from Gazon we can use.
Yes.
there's loads of branches and
Yes.
you know, rotting trees in there which need to be taken out.
Yes.
Question is then what we do with that stuff. I mean, I was perhaps going to speak to Owen Smith at the leisure park to see if we can see if we can put it on his land, or perhaps on the Fellowship Walk land, or take it away and use it for firewood.
Yes. But that's brilliant, that's really excellent. So in a way that's happening anyway. And similarly the Sandwich Green Group in conjunction with the Environment and Conservation Group are already dealing with the garden. So in a way perhaps the council could just say that's very good, thank you, keep going. Okay, Councillor, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I must say, Councillor Hemming, it's a really good report. However, I think one of the things that's really missing is the depth of water in the road walk. The old moat, that was maintained by a weir on the Woodensborough Road, which was dug out 30, and I keep saying that, I said to David, I've shown them pictures of what the level of the water should be in the road walk compared to the level of the water in the butts. It should be nearly a foot higher, because it's only rainwater coming off Cowsley's Meadow that used to create that little tiny flow and take the water. I know it's not flowing at the butts, but the butts was always a lower level than the road walk. And also, I don't know you get riparian rights along the butts, because that's private land and no district council land, there's no Sandwich Town Council.
No, I only meant the
Yeah.
road walk.
And I did suggest to one of the chappies from Townscape, by the officers, about from the river, Sandown Creek, you know, and to Sandown, you know, where the river used to come in, by the bulwarks, and where the bridge, because there's all sort of thing, but to actually put a footpath along there, sort of, what do you call it, a chippings path or something, it's in the summer month, people could actually walk along there and see the height of the ramparts, because really if you do walk along there, that rampart is quite impressive, and you imagine another 20 foot on top of that. But, and I think also a good idea if we can get a representative on the internal drainage board, I think that's very important.
Yes.
That's what we need to do, we need a voice, don't we?
Yes.
See it on the internal drainage board. And after I heard riparian rights, I was when they were talking about the Delphi area, because a lot of people don't realise you've got the main road, the highway, you've got the footpath, the Delphi is actually on the property of them houses. Their houses go down to the footpath. Because
But they don't have riparian responsibility.
No, they
because
don't,
the
they don't.
Environment Agency does.
no, I know we had a big discussion years ago about this, but the highway land, cases it ends at the footpath.
Yes.
Can you talk through the chair?
Oh, sorry,
That's all right.
Chair.
Yes.
Who does the Delph belong to in New Street? Because I remember when my parents lived in the Warrers house, they had to apply to go over the Delph.
That's right.
Yeah, so it didn't belong to them. They had to apply to go
The
over.
land it's on, is it?
So the Delph never belonged to them in front, the Delph in front of their house.
It's a waterway, any waterway, it's a very across a waterway.
Yeah, but I thought you just said that.
The land
is
that the
owned by-
Delphi is situated is on the land of the houses.
Yeah, but
I
we
think-
still don't own it. It doesn't matter.
I think, Councillor Hemming, you said that this was the second draft, that there will be a third draft. And in fact, formally, this working group was set up by the council. So I think what you should do is take account of the comments that have been made, in particular the one about the weir under the Woodensborough Road.
Yeah.
Because I know
That's
Councillor
historic.
Franklin has been going on, and there's nothing about that in your third draft. But also, I think you should tighten up some of the recommendations, but also emphasise again this option of getting a flow in the moat, which I think is what really people want. I mean, that's the sense I got from attending the work group. And hopefully it would deal with the mosquito problem, which is what people really, really worry about, understandably. So if you could present a draft 3 to the council, and taking account of some of these comments. Councillor Sampson, then Councillor Reid.
I was just going to ask if we could move to a vote, because the time mentioned in your opinion.
Yes, we will do in a minute, and and the vote will be to recommend the report and suggest that draft 3 goes to council. Councillor Murray.
Just a couple of questions. Number one, who owns the land for road walk? Is it BBC or STC?
The road.
The road walk land, is it
It's not.
BBC or is it Town Council?
Yes, Councillor Heaven.
DDC owns the side with the footpath.
Yeah.
Sandwich Town Council
Owns the other
owns the
side.
side. Cowries.
I agree with the recommendations. I agree with what Councillor Wells said. Let's get in there and do it. However, going to be a burden of bad news. I think we need to get the permission in writing from the DDC to say we can do it before we actually go ahead and do it, because we may face consequences.
Oh, in the road walk.
Yes.
What, you mean they're clearing the...
Clearly get them down. I'm more than happy to help you. I mean, I'm 65, but probably like nuts my ankles.
Yeah, Chair. Chair, that is because of the rats.
Yeah.
Because of the danger of Lyme disease.
I see.
Rats.
And
There's
the
massive
rats...
rats in there, and the old.
I just think we need to get if
Well, we don't want Lyme disease.
No,
There's
it's
something
like
wrong
a
with
snake.
it. Not at the...
if Councillor Wells can get a confirmation saying yes we can do it, then by all means go for it. But I think we should just wait until we get a confirmation before we go in there.
Okay, Councillor Heaven, last comment.
Well, we can always clear the Cowries Meadow side up to about halfway along the water, and as long as we don't intrude into Dover District Council.
Yes, I think that's...
We wouldn't steal their sill.
Okay, so we have a motion proposed by Councillor Sampson that we recommend this report that, I don't think we need to have a motion actually. I think we're just asking Councillor to submit draft 3 to the council.
Well, just to interrupt, if I may. So the proposal was, first of all, we need to commend Councillor Heaven on his report as well as the work of the volunteers.
Yes.
So we need to include that and make sure that's done. And then the additional thing was we were going to consider, what was it, having a rep, or trying to push for a rep for the...
Well, we've already asked for that.
Yeah.
I don't think we've had a reply. Have we ever had a reply?
I'm saying for the purposes that if we do get a reply, I would suggest until the election with Councillor Heaven, and then after the election, whoever is
Yeah.
just in
What,
case.
the point of contact, the single point of contact, is that,
Yeah.
yes.
Just so that we've got one in place for
Okay.
every week.
Well,
So,
de facto, I am.
Exactly.
Don't we, Chair? Don't we just have to note and accept this report?
well, it's not the final version, and I think we can recommend it, but the final version, because this working group was actually set up by the council, the final version goes to the council. And we'll have another discussion there, hopefully a shorter one, because the recommendation or the options will be very clear. Okay.
An executive
So I
summary.
don't think we need to
Do anything?
do anything at the moment, but we should bear in mind that when we come to discuss it at the council, that we do thank the volunteers and Councillor Heaven and all the members of the working group for producing an excellent report. Okay? Thank you. Right. Now we have the
Yeah, that's material one.
key conveniences report from Councillor Sampson, if you would like to.
Yes, so I imagine you've all had a good chance to read it. I fully disagree with your opening remarks. It's not a working group.
I don't want to.
As page 3 points out, it says full council meeting where I was made lead member for fund toilets. Or something on that line, I believe. But so full council at our last meeting also agreed to the short-term recommendations and put the long-term improvements back to this committee.
I don't think we did agree. I
I
think
checked through the recording before the meeting, we very much did. I can point out the exact time of the recording to everybody as well. But the short-term recommendations have been agreed, and I think we need to go ahead with them, otherwise we wasted a month. We need to discuss the long-term improvements today, also bearing in mind they are more detailed. It's like, to summarise those very quickly, so that's the second half of the report.
could we just go back to the short-term recommendations, because I have one or two things to add to them, which I think would be useful. Two things in particular. First of all, that events organisers, when applying to the Tollbridge Fund for support, financial support, should include in their budget and what they're asking for the costs of additional staffing for opening up the conveniences for a longer period during the days that the events are.
The event group wouldn't know how much it would cost us, so that would be difficult to do.
Well, there's another short-term suggestion which I also want to add in. I think, secondly, it's quite clear from your report, which is very comprehensive, that contactless payments are currently not working.
No.
And I would like to make it clear, because it's not clear in the short-term recommendations, that contactless system, so long as there's no penalty, and if there is a penalty, I want to know what it is removed as soon as possible, and that the conveniences are free this summer from Easter to September.
This was passed in the last council
Well, it's
meeting.
not in the short-term recommendations. Could you
So-
indicate where it is?
The bit which it says, open the interior space and gents ladies toilets for public immediately, and this time can be used to experiment with the popularity of having staff located there, period of not paying to use the facilities, etc. If we decide to put that back to full council, we have delayed it 1 month.
If there's amendments, they have to go back to full council anyway.
Well, they're hardly amendments, they're just suggestions that we do immediately, but as I say, we do have to check whether there'll be a penalty or not, and I'm not clear whether there will be. Remove that contactless system, because it's just annoying and upsetting.
The contactless system isn't on, so the reason why the short-term recommendation is phrased as such, open the interior space. So that is on the map you can see on page 10. That bit in red is currently being used as a temporary storeroom office. That's the bit which the recommendation we passed at last full council meeting was to open that up because there's no contactless system currently engaged there. So we can just go ahead and make it free straight away, which is why I advocated this to be passed at the last council meeting.
So how would that work? So you wouldn't have to use a contactless system to, how would
So it would have to be staffed. This is why
Yes,
the
it
short-term
would.
recommendation was passed,
So-
so this is to look into this.
Yes, so where is this empty space? It's called kitchen office, is it?
Yes, there's an office. I presume most of us have been in the toilets.
Yes.
Yeah, so that would be the office. So back when it was staffed by people,
Yes.
that's where they would be.
Okay. So you're saying that we are now committed to having staff in that office? Because I can't see that in the short-term recommendation.
Forgive me. So no, I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm saying the officers need to look at it immediately, which is why we passed it at the last full council meeting.
Well, what did we pass that says that we should have staff?
We passed the short-term recommendations, which I can read out in full for everybody.
Well, it says this time could be used to experiment with the popularity of having staff located there. That's not the same as saying we will have staff located there.
Again, this is where officers come in because they have a specialism to actually look at this and go into it and what works and what doesn't work. It's giving them the freedom to work with it so that they can have the best solution that works for them and the public.
Can I ask, Chair,
Yes.
has anything happened since we passed that?
I don't know.
We haven't got the officers, have we?
No.
Caroline, kind of. Hopefully part-time.
Caroline does the toilet.
I don't know, but I would suggest that we focus on. So the reason we've got committees like this is so we can explore stuff in more detail. So the big thing is the long-term improvements, such as whether we want to have a contactless card for everything, whether we want to.
I'm
We
still
change the places
concerned,
around.
I just want to stop. I'm still concerned that nothing is going to happen now. And I think that as soon as possible, the contactless system should be removed and the council should employ staff. It's not actually, the short-term recommendations don't actually say that.
So the long-term improvements we need to consider is whether we do full-time staffing arrangement, whether we do contacts everything, which is what we'll be discussing today. I'm just saying the short-term recommendations have been passed by full council. We should consider long-term stuff, whether we're going to staff it permanently, whether we're going to use the changing places grant, make it a business, etc. The different options considered in detail in the report. That's what we need to discuss today.
No, I think we do need to make a decision as to whether that contactless system is going to be removed as soon as possible.
So that is in the long-term stuff we discussed today.
You need it open anyway, don't you, to open the chair.
Is anybody going to support me?
I'm going to support you, but you didn't say yes down your speak.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry. Thank you.
Don't we need to take the first short-term thing is to get them open, isn't it? Why don't we just take the contact listing off and leave them open for now and just use the same stuff we're using?
As I've explained, the central bit, which I've asked us to open, doesn't have a contact list thing on it, so we can just open it.
Well, which is great, so that's
Yes,
nothing.
but how do people get to use the loo?
Just walk in there.
No, there's one in there, there's losing there as well.
So on the map on page 10, it shows you what it looks like. So you enter, it's a door, you open the door, and there's a gents and ladies toilet.
Yeah. So they should be opened like from tomorrow.
So there's a single entrance called entrance lobby.
Yep.
Okay, because it's not clear how you get from there into the ladies' toilet.
I think
Because
most
there
people
isn't a
use the
door
toilet.
actually on the map. There is into the gents' toilet.
There's a door missing there.
I've been inside the conveniences, the staff showed me, and yes, you can access them. There is a door to the ladies' toilets.
Okay. Okay. So, right. So what we're saying is that and where is the door to the entrance? Oh, I see. So that door to the entrance lobby will be open during the opening hours of the conveniences.
So we would be able to open it, yes, is what I think we want. We want to have something like that because at the end of the day, this time is going to be an excellent chance for us to see what works and what doesn't work.
Yes, exactly. It's a pilot, and that's very important to do. And then there would be staff in the kitchen, stroke office.
So the office. It depends on what method the council wants to go with. I'm going to leave this completely up to you. I think that we should have staff because that's very popular, and it's up to then you guys to recommend to full council whether you want them to charge or not. I would suggest we don't charge. We try it over the summer.
I quite agree.
I think it's ridiculous we should be paying to use something that is a public convenience by one of our major areas, especially during events.
Yes.
However, we also need to consider, first of all, that, make a recommendation to council, and then if we want to do something later. So the changing places thing, for example, we still don't know what's the answer to, Councillor Carter made a good point the other month, about whether we have to match fund it. We need to know that, because that's probably the biggest capital expenditure of the different options. However, it was the most popular. Contributions from local organisations, sadly, they're not too keen.
No.
As I think everybody can imagine. What was it? Adapting space for business. It was looked into very seriously a few years ago when the contactless thing was installed initially. Because the actual problem with the contactless is your interior space you can't really do it for, because otherwise you pay once and you could use all the toilets, you could let everybody in, hence why it's going to be close to the storeroom. Whereas you've got it on the outside, shower and disabled toilet, and then the other disabled toilet. But yeah, so they were looking at business at the same time. There was a business interested, but the council decided not to go ahead with that. If we were to pursue that option, then obviously that's going to entail a bit of work, and that would be a conversion of the central area, with caveats about them maintaining the toilets, keeping them open, etc., as well as, of course, whether a business would actually be interested. Awaiting potential refurbishment, so I was really happy to say about the the council market toilets getting refurbed at some point. It's on DVC's list, similar to the ones I think Stanbrook.
I think
That's it.
right. So I think we do need to make a recommendation to the council at the next council meeting that the contactless system is removed, that the council look at the cost of staffing to look after the conveniences, because we really do need to keep them in decent order.
I think if there's access from the gent side, I don't think the contact list could just stay there, couldn't it?
Could you say that again?
Well, if there's access from the, if you look at it from the left-hand side, if that can just be unlocked, the contact list can just be left in situ for much time being.
I see. Okay.
The only thing I've got to say about what Mr. Mayor said is the fact that the contactless toilets are the disabled toilets, the unisex toilets. So if you keep the contactless, I mean, some of them have radar keys, some of them may not, but if they don't, then they'll have to pay to go to use the loo in the disabled toilet. Another disabled body can look straight into the male ladies of gents and use it for free. That's my concern.
And I would suggest that instead of removing the systems, because that could be costly, we deactivate the one that's on the disabled toilet. The one for the shower, I'm not sure how it would work without it, because currently you,
No, I
you
think the
pay.
shower is a separate problem. I think we should leave that.
So just to clarify everyone, basically you pay and you get it for 20 minutes,
Yeah.
and then it just automatically opens, which was a surprise to some residents apparently.
I think for the moment, leave the shower. I'm just trying to get clear how we're going to proceed to get something done quickly.
Are you saying that, excuse me, Chair, you're saying these toilets should have someone there
Well,
employed?
it would be preferable.
That's always shut it down because it was £28,000 a year.
Yes.
There's nothing in the budget, is there,
No, there is.
employed anyone there?
And can I just make a point that if this committee recommends that Tollbridge starts charging or putting costing towards events, the events won't put it for the Tollbridge fund because they can't afford it. I know that for a fact.
I'm not talking about.
No, but I think you mentioned it earlier, Councillor Anderson, regarding that if it's put in with their costings, where they're non-profit organisations, their money is purely run for the events, they're not there to pay the council to use the toilets, it's to pay people to
It would
use the
be.
toilets.
They would ask the Tollbridge Fund for the money to fund staffing for extra hours, because otherwise they'll have to pay for it out of their own budget. It would be a way for the Tollbridge Fund to fund the additional hours. They would simply put it into their grant application, the cost of additional staffing, that's all I'm suggesting.
Might I suggesting a way forward? So we recommend to council, so the interior area we've already agreed at council is going to be open, and we want to action that. We need to find out how much it's going to cost to staff them, or whether we are able to leave them open, and the cleaners who currently pop by on the road to every several hours to clean them are able to leave them alone and the place isn't going to get vandalised. So currently, I think you might be able to use the shower now, I'll have to double check, but that's been vandalised very, very badly. And of course, if we start seeing vandalism in the interior area, we are going to have to staff it.
Yes.
So thinking of a way forward, we recommend to full council that we deactivate the contacts card machine on the disabled exterior toilet. We open up the centre and our staff to investigate the cost of understaffing it and test the system for maybe a few months perhaps.
Yes, I would support that. I mean, I think it's very important to have a pilot. And that's why I suggested from East at the end of September that we might want to shorten that period. Councillor Wild.
So what hours are you talking about? 8 till 8 or something of that sort?
So I'm thinking we probably should start with the current hours. So I believe it's, I've written in the report about circa 8, 9 until about 5ish. And sometimes they are maintained for longer if there's something going on. I would suggest for the course of the pilot, whatever fits with the budget with the staff. I think we'll have to just go with that for the time being.
And could I ask a second question? The kitchen office, you talk in the report about the business possibly using that space?
So if a business was to use it, the interior space, so that entire central gents and ladies section and the office and that small storeroom would have to be converted for their business. Yeah.
Could it not just be the kitchen office? I'm not sure if it has a window facing.
No, so it's got to be, essentially, you walk in, you've got a door, so you have both doors inside which lead to the gents and the ladies, then you've got the door to the office and it's just got a window pane. It doesn't have one to the outside, it's very small.
But it could be a ice cream or a burger or something.
In the toilet?
No,
Just not.
it's too small for that.
Yeah, it's very small.
And it doesn't sound very good.
Yeah, but that's 2 doors between the
I
itself
mean,
and
there are
the-
competition, I mean, yeah.
I mean, years
where
ago,
the changing places, where does the changing places do go?
So the changing places, so the map that's on page 10, that is from the changing places when they're investigating it. So that entire area in red, which is the same that just said for the business, would be converted into this changing places.
I
toilet.
see.
It would also entail an additional cost to modify the entrance hallway, which we would have to pay, which are probably about 20 grand.
So the changing places, Lou, would replace all the ladies' toilets, all the gents' toilets, the entrance lobby and the kitchen.
Yeah, and it would cost us a lot.
That does not sound like a good idea.
Yeah, so this is the difficulty we've got with it, and that's of course where we need to find out obviously about the grant, because if it's match funded, we're going to be paying maybe 70 grand and we can't afford that. We need toilets on the quay. Exactly.
And there is a disabled toilet there now. It does rather sound as though we don't want the changing places. We certainly don't want it there, do we?
In a longer term view, Dover District Council has expressed interest in extending the mooring facilities on the quay for more vessels all the way up to the White Bridge, the Iron Bridge. And theoretically, if Dover District Council took it seriously, as they might, that would then be earnings for Dover District Council, which would be enhanced and improved if the people on those vessels could have extensive toilets and showers available for their use. Therefore, to some extent, Dover District Council could be asked by us to make a contribution.
Yes.
To those.
I'm noted that under my list of long-term recommendations. Consult with the Heritage Harbour Group, re-provision of showers, etc. Consult the DDC remooring fee policy for Heritage Harbour, and if they might agree a percentage of the fee to use for staffing of the loos. That might be one way of approaching it. But it's slightly chicken and egg.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Just quickly, years ago when the attendants used to do the toilets and they used to charge, they used to use the office as a mini tourist information. So
Yes.
loads of maps, town guides and that kind of thing in there. Maybe we can coincide that with the tourism and see what we can do something with it as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there are very good arguments for having staff there during the hours that they're open during the day. So, how are we going to proceed? Councillor Sampson, Archie, did you make a note of what Councillor Sampson?
To deactivate the contactless system, disable toilet, find the cost of the staffing, how much it's going to cost,
Yes.
and kitchen obviously used by the staff,
Yes.
and to find out about the grant of the changing places.
Yes.
And to, wasn't it to open the toilets
That's
from
right.
now? Yeah.
Yes. From Easter.
No toilets now. Why
Well,
don't we
they'll keep the charging system until Easter.
It doesn't work.
Oh no, it works. So
It
Well,
doesn't work
I've
out.
had several times when it hasn't worked, and I've seen other people.
the issue is
It doesn't work.
so you have to keep your card there for quite a while. It's a bit weird.
Yeah.
But if you remove the contactless, you won't need that anymore to open it.
Yes. Councillor Wells.
So, we were told earlier, the short-term recommendations have been agreed already.
Yeah.
So just going to the long-term improvement recommendations, council is asked to decide on the longer-term potential if they would like to progress with changing places, open space for business. I think we've agreed changing places should not be pursued,
Well, we should vote on that.
but we should look at the potential for business that needs more investigation, I think.
So we could reach out at least and try and find maybe one who was previously interested, maybe still.
And whether any adaptations are needed, or the mini tourist office, doubling up would fit in with the tourism.
Yes.
Whether the second one is whether we want to decide whether to continue to charge. I think we all agree we should not charge.
Yeah.
We need to put these to the vote on.
Yes.
And the last one, do we need to staff the toilets? I think we're saying yes. Again, we need to look at the cost implications of that.
Councillor Franklin.
No budget, is there?
I think what think, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I think what it was I think Councillor Sampson said about the pilot. So we use the attendants that do the toilets now to unlock and lock both and maintain both.
I think it's 9 till 4 or something, wasn't it?
As a pilot from Easter till.
Right, 9 till 3.
But
In the
it's,
centre, I don't know that, don't know.
I mean, it's chicken and egg, isn't it? Because if you do a deal with a business, they can take on a kind of a rent-free deal in return for opening and closing, caretaking.
I think the first recommendation we make to council is that the conveniences become free as of now. Is that?
To clarify, that doesn't include the shower.
No, it doesn't include the shower. I'm just talking about the conveniences. So, Councillor Sampson, you want to propose that? Anybody second it?
I'll second this.
Okay. Shall we vote on that? So that's our first recommendation. The second recommendation is that we don't wish to progress the changing places grant if the changing places loo takes up the whole of those conveniences. I mean, we might want to progress it if it goes somewhere else, but I think we're saying the key conveniences are not a suitable place for the changing places system.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Anybody want to propose that?
Propose.
Councillor Wiles, anybody second?
I'll second.
Councillor Sipican. Can you vote? Okay. The third proposal is that for the moment, the loos are open from, is it 8 till 5? Is that what you said?
It kind of depends. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head.
Okay.
I think 9 till 4, I'm not sure.
It's 9 to 4.
I think
Okay.
it was.
But the Guildhall staff, existing
Everybody
Guildhall,
staff, have we?
have we not got any
One of the ladies is going off off sick leave for about 6 weeks.
Right.
Lady.
So at the moment we're saying they can't be staffed at all, are we?
No, somebody goes and opens them and, oh,
Might I suggest that they are opened to the public and cleaned on the rota, and we maybe keep it short, we make it a month, where they don't permanently sit in the office. And maybe that could be a bit risky if they do get vandalised. We know we've definitely got to staff them, but maybe we
Yes.
start with that.
So pilot for a month with a system, but we're still saying that, well, Councillor Franklin is saying there aren't staff at the Guildhall to.
Our toilet cleaners are part-time. They come in the morning and they come in the afternoon. They do not work all day.
No.
There's no budget for it.
No, but would they be able to, I mean, at the
We got
moment
money.
you can theoretically open a loo with your contactless card. What we're saying now is that somebody has to be down there at 9 o'clock every morning, opening them,
Yeah.
or opening that single door, and somebody has to be there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon
Clean and lock up.
to clean and lock up.
Yeah.
Now, are you saying that is impossible?
It very well could be. Maybe you've got one caretaker, we can have one cleaner. But I don't know. Our town sergeants of the other ones on holiday. They've got those holidays coming up.
Right.
We could pass it pending staff availability.
South of England. Yeah.
Okay, but so that means that we'd have to keep the contactless system for the moment.
Well, it doesn't stop us from deactivating the one on the exterior.
No, but so people can still enter them without using a card.
Yeah, so you can deactivate the one on the exterior. So they're opened and they're closed every few hours. Pops by, cleans them. I'm suggesting that perhaps for a month, because again, the central area doesn't have a contactless card system on it. It's literally just locked. So you open that up, they enter, open, clean every few hours, and lock at the end of the day.
Yes, but we still have to have somebody to open that door.
Can I make a suggestion?
How do you do that?
May I make a suggestion? Have you spoken, I know you spoke to the Medieval Trust and the drill hall. Have you spoke to them about being key holders? So unlock in the morning, one unlock in the morning, one unlock in the evening, and the cleaner goes in there during the day.
So
Another day cleaner.
it's a bit of,
No, I'm saying the one that cards on here we have, yeah.
they wouldn't be around there all the time like
No,
that.
I don't think that's reliable. Councillor Wells.
I mean, what about the option of them being open 24 hours?
that
Basically,
on the basis that most people are not vandals and won't sleep in them or destroy them or.
I think that's.
That's why we put something in there because of vandalism.
I think reading the original report on the toilets, looking at the finances and costs, although there was a figure, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a figure for the damage and vandalism and
Yes.
the cost of that, and there was a figure for having the contactless system. But in fact, much of the vandalism was caused by the fact that people couldn't get in,
That's right.
and so they were
Yes.
kicking the door open.
Yes.
But if they could get in,
They wouldn't be so angry.
they wouldn't be so inclined to kick the
No,
door.
that's right.
But even if the cost of repair for vandalism exceeded any income we might have got, it might be worth it to have a 24-hour available toilet.
It's about £4,000, so.
Yeah, for that would be the gap.
So where are you going with this?
I think it should just, sorry, something, I think it should just be daytime open.
I agree.
It was vandalised before, the showering was trashed,
Yeah.
the showers, and that's why we put the full-time attendant there, and that's why, to save costs on the full-time attendant, we went to the keyless system.
Okay.
The
I
risk-
think
the-
it's
sorry,
very
the risk of it being vandalised is then it's not potentially available for use. So that's, it's not just about repair, it's about
Yes.
being out of use.
I think we should recommend, the third recommendation for council is that as soon as possible, oh gosh, have we already voted that they should be free? Yes, we have, haven't we?
Yeah.
But I think we should make that conditional on availability of staff to open the main door in the morning, close it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I think that should be conditional. No, there isn't at the moment, but we will have to do something about that. Is that acceptable, that motion that we passed, that they should be free, is conditional on there being a member of staff available to open the main door in the morning and close it again at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and also to clean them during at some point during that period. Is that all right?
I think if the member of staff is going to close, you might have to close it out after if you're doing cleaning on the two toilets.
Sorry,
I'm saying, you're talking about closing them at 4, that means the member of staff will be there past 4, wouldn't it?
all right.
So, because they used to do that toilet, and then can we do this toilet, and that toilet shuts at 5, I think.
Okay.
So
Okay.
you'd have to work it out the times, you'd have to work out
Yes.
the times.
Yes, so we
Don't
could
say
say
time.
late afternoon.
Yeah.
Is that all right, Artie? Have you got that? Okay. We passed a motion, a recommendation to the council that the toilets are free and that the contactless system of entry is stopped. But that is conditional on there being a member of staff available to open the main door first thing in the morning and in the late afternoon. Is that all right? Okay. I think that's as far as we can go, and that we pilot this when we set it up. We pilot it for a month and see how it works. Councillor Wyeth.
The alternative is a pilot where it's open 24 hours.
Well, I think we've decided we don't want that. I would be.
People don't stop needing to pee at 4 o'clock.
Unfortunately, because of certain things, we have to stop on 24 hours. Unfortunately, the toilets that was by Malcolm Waite's garage was 24 hours, and the other, we had to send off that toilet, unfortunately.
Yes, okay. I think we should move on. Thank you very much.
We should vote on that last one.
And the last one was, I thought we had.
They have voted.
Okay. Can we all vote on that? Could somebody propose it?
No.
Votes for
somebody second, councillor Wiles, okay, that's vote.
Isn't it just an
It-
amendment? to what
It
we
is a
already
sort
voted?
of amendment, it's an additional condition on becoming free. Okay.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, you seem to be.
Can we congratulate Councillor Sanson on that?
Yes, very
Well
good.
done.
Let's go. If everyone wants to have a format in the future, feel free.
Okay. So the next item, what's it?
Guildhall forecourt
Sets, okay. I said I would give you a verbal update. I think I made it clear at the council meeting that I had written to Councillor's friend Chandler some time ago with 7 questions about how who owned the sets and whether they'd been market valued, whether they'd been sold or given away, and how it was that it appeared to be the case that one household had got a very large number of them. And I urged them to make a public statement because I saw that there was a great deal of discussion on Facebook about the issue, and I haven't had a substantive reply from either Councillor Friend or Councillor Chandler. In addition, Simon Mallet put in a freedom of information request to DDC asking for a document trail of the advertisement for the sets, and he received a copy of one leaflet which would have been available in the Guildhall. And it was also suggested by DDC that the STC website provided a link to the DDC website about how to apply for the sets, but it's not clear. I don't know whether anybody was ever able to find it. Anyway, 23 people applied, 6 people have got some. The conclusion of the answers from DDC was there was no decision made to favour any individuals. A fair process was undertaken and followed, and the sets were given to those who wanted them. And I think there might be some queries about that. In addition, I'm aware that Councillor Wiles has sent in freedom of information requests, and that other Sandwich residents have either done so or are thinking of doing so. So I think that's where we've got to, really. Councillor Heaven.
You said the sets have been given to those,
Yes.
not sold.
No.
So is that the total number? All of them have gone?
Well, there still seem to be some
Because what's
still
about
there.
remaining? Oh,
Applications have to be in by September, at the end of September 2022.
Do you have to be a stonemason to be given the granite sets?
No, you have to have applied, but none, I have to say, the answers from DDC did not explain, how they actually allocated out of the 23 applicants, how 6 got them and 17 didn't.
and also how many sets they got individually? Did they just get one amount?
Didn't
Did
say.
they get multiple?
No,
That's
no
quite
answer.
relevant, really.
No.
I was just going to say, Chair,
Yes.
aren't those extra ones who didn't get any the ones that applied when they were told afterwards to contact Sarah Horan?
They
So-
were always told to contact Sarah Warren. That was in the leaflet that was.
Yeah, the leaflet we've seen after the event. Okay, I checked downstairs and there aren't leaflets, but that doesn't matter. What I was going to say is there is a link to DDC from the thing, and if you have the question
From the thing.
from the Sandwich Town Council website, there's a link to DDC, but it doesn't offer you any sense. It just goes to the DDC webpage,
I see. Okay.
and then you have to guess to look at the sets.
Right. Okay. That's helpful information. Thank you.
It's not
Councillor
very
Sampson.
Yeah, so what was it? I was able to get in touch with Councillor Friend before the meeting, He forwarded me an email he had sent on the 3rd of March about the sets.
Which we all received.
So yeah, just checking we've received that. But he asked me personally to read it out for everyone. He asked me to read it out. What was it? I was contacted by residents with concerns regarding the advertisement of and their ability to obtain ground sets from the Guildhall redevelopment project. I was able to signpost my communication regarding this. However, I felt it imperative I collated the facts in full before I was able to offer a complete answer. Unfortunately, there's been significant misinformation circulated about the granite sets from the old forecourt in addition to the option to request them. I'm hoping the communication below will go some way to allay several of the concerns. So there's an attached leaflet which we've received. It was produced and distributed to various locations like Age Concern, Guildhall, Library, etc. Also a timeline of communication plan from officers. The officers also replied to it, which he's forwarded to us. We're disappointed to hear there's a belief of an effective lack of communication for the project. Very conscious it would be important to communicate well, and they provide some commentary. So July 2022, GDC Communications Office prepared a communications plan for the project. Press release on 23rd of August 2022 to advertise the start of the project. Within press releases, readers were advised how they could keep updated on the project by visiting GDC website, project-specific webpage, signing up to keep you posted, checking GDC social media, and then more leaflets. In conjunction with the press release from the GDC website, they went live with an FAQ and provided a list of point contacts for the works. So Sarah Hoare, as already mentioned, GDC's Community Development Officer, who's available every weekly sandwich for inquiries. STC provided a link to the GDC website from that date also. In conjunction with the press release leaflets were delivered to the Guildhall and available to the public. A drop-in session for the 8th of September in advance of the commencement of the highway works and posted via Keep Me Posted to sandwich residents who opted in for projects. All plans were displayed and a significant number of local residents attended. In advance of phase 1, so the highway works on the road, Councillor Dan Friend and the site manager for the main contractor personally visited every premises 2 to 3 weeks before the works commenced that was directly affected by the works, introduced themselves and provided point of contact. Requests for visits from further afield that came in via GDC's Community Development Officer to properties in Market Street were also met. And then the phase 2, which is the square works that are currently ongoing, the main contractor's site manager visited every premises that would be directly affected by the works to introduce themselves and provide point of contact. Further press releases also issued during the works as appropriate, with keeping posted updates and updates to the FAQs on the website. GDC's Community Development Officer has also been available throughout the project and is in Sandwich every Thursday morning as well. With regard to the cobbles, they can confirm that through a visit to the GDC website following the original press release, or to the Guildhall and other locations to pick up a leaflet, members of the public were invited to register their interest in granites. Deadline was given for responses, as you mentioned, for September 2022, and then more than 20 expressions of interest came in. But yeah, again, we should just contact them.
But he did tell us that before, it would have been, Chair, it would have been very helpful.
He said this on 3rd of March.
Yes, he did send it out. What it doesn't, could I just say, it doesn't explain how 6 individuals out of the 23 applicants acquired sets, what happened to the other 17. So there is no explanation of the process, rather, there is no explanation of the outcome. There's plenty of stuff about the process, and a claim that it was well publicised, but there is no explanation of the outcome.
I think I'd like to make a point that if you're making a point that's well publicised, that's talking about the whole picture, the whole development. It's not specific about the sets, and the question was about the sets, and there's a very small mention within that. So it's not very clear regarding the process at all.
Chair, could I
Councillor,
say
Councillor Heather, then Councillor Waller.
I'm coming back to the issue of the value of those sets, in that I'm not a stonemason myself, so I couldn't make a precise valuation, but I've heard valuations of anything from £10,000 to £30,000 being the value of those stones. And are we to believe that Dover District Council has willingly given up the opportunity of making a bit of money to save the taxpayers to the tune of anything between £10,000 and £30,000, and then just give them away to someone in the know?
In answer to one of Simon Mallett's questions it stated that there was an expectation that if the cobbles were not disposed of in some way, they would be used for construction hardcore. In other words, their value, as has been established, I think by Councillor Wiles looking on eBay, the value of second-hand granite sets does not seem to have been taken into account. But I don't want to spend a great deal of time on this. I do think that this is an appropriate issue for the Heritage and Townscape Committee to consider. And I still find it rather disappointing that I didn't get a response from Councillor Brendan Chandler to my 7 questions, and that we are still mystified as a population as to how 6 individuals got cobbles, 1 in particular.
You can't just single out just one person. I know exactly what you're talking about, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah.
It's starting to get a bit silly regarding that person and the bad mouthing that person in question.
I'm just saying that the outcome is interesting.
At the end of the day, Mr Mayor, you know this, at the end of the day, Sandwich Town Council do not own the land for the Guildhall forecourt. DDC own the land, which means they own the materials on the land. So if they want to do the sets, they can do the sets. It's a DDC project. Sandwich Town Council have got no say in the project, and they're saying in the consultation. DDC own the land, they own the sets, they own the materials there, and they also they're running the projects. Sadly, DDC, STC can't have much to say.
But they really feel that. Can I just make one more point?
I want Councillor Evans, who was first, and then.
No.
Okay. Councillor Thomas.
It seems to me that you're almost saying that it's irrelevant and people of Sandwich should.
No, it's not relevant at all.
No,
It's not relevant at all.
Please don't interrupt.
It's not
It-
relevant
it
at all.
is-
You argue my case. I will argue my case.
Excuse
Thank you very
me,
much.
it was my turn to speak, thank you, and I'd like to finish speaking. Thank you, because I just wanted to respond to what you said.
When you know what goes on in the town, well then you can lecture it.
Let Councillor
It's
Thomas
irrelevant
speak.
what you're saying. The thing is that you seem to be saying that DDC and Councillor Friend is our representative for DDC
That's correct.
are not accountable for those decisions, and they are, because they're elected. And it does affect people of Sandwich. So it seems to be that you're questioning the people who
I'm
want
not questioning the people.
answers.
If they want the answers, they should get the answers. I'm answering the question, Councillor Anderson. Thank you very much.
I haven't actually finished. The thing is that the answers haven't been given freely and clearly for the questions that are being asked. And that is a concern for the
It's
people of
been
Sandwich.
widely publicised.
And
Councillor
excuse me,
Friend
no,
mentioned in his
please.
email.
And I'm going to
I
finish
want
it.
one councillor to talk at once.
And also Sandwich Town Council. So it is extremely relevant for Sandwich Town Council to take an interest and inquire about this issue.
Okay, Councillor Wiles.
Sorry, yeah, I'm not interested in who's had these granite sets. I'm not interested in the names. I'd like to know the relative amounts that person A, B, C, etc. had. The key questions for me are who made the decision that these should be given away rather than sold, because they're valuable items. And secondly, the DDC said they will be given to locals and to Sandwich residents. And what was the definition of that? Because my view is they're not historic, but they're valuable artefacts that should have stayed within the town of Sandwich. But I do think that this council, given everything else that's been going on, has been remiss in not keeping our eye on this. We should have been asking more questions. We put 350,000 into this project. We should have been more on the case in terms of, seeking better communication, asking DDC officers to come here, having notice boards. I don't think what's happened today has been good enough given our stakeholder involvement.
Chair, can I say one really quick thing? If someone writes to us and tells us it's widely publicised, does that mean that it's widely publicised? Because how comes all of us didn't know about it? Why weren't we told so that we could offer them to people and publicise it properly?
The information.
I don't.
Chair, can I propose we move on?
Yes,
Yes.
I think we should.
Not really.
I think we've aired this enough. So I would like to come to the Bowling Street lights. I just will give you a verbal update. I've been in communication with a Bowling Street resident who's an electrical contractor in his day job. And I'm hoping that he will discover what the cost of 2 heritage lamps, their installation and maintenance costs might be, and will inform, well, us via me. And I've made it clear to that person that some external funding would almost certainly have to be found if he were to find 2 heritage lamps, which are cheaper than the ones that are proposed by KCC, because it's quite clear from Councillor Chandler's response to the question as to whether KCC would provide heritage lamps for Bowling Street. The answer is basically no. So I'm waiting on this person who lives in Bowling Street, so I thought I should tell you that. So I think we can now move to item 10, which is on co-option of members to this committee. I asked the acting town clerk to write to 7 individuals or organisations which you as members of the committee have suggested to be co-opted, to see if they would be willing to be co-opted. And of those 7, 2 said they would prefer not to be co-opted. 3 said they would like to be co-opted, I'll come to who they were in a minute. 1 said she's thinking about it, and there has been no reply from the Stanwich Chamber of Commerce. The 3 that were suggested, the 3 that said they would be willing to be co-opted, well, there were 2 of the 3 were quite clear. That's Carol George from Sandwich and Bloom and the Town Team, Anne-Marie Hugan from the St Peter's Church and the Market Manager. And Keith Heaven said he would like to do it, but he wasn't absolutely certain. And could, if he doesn't want to do it, could it be somebody else representing the Sandwich Environment and Conservation Group? So that's how we are. So I don't know, Keith, if you want to say.
Just to explain it, it wasn't clear if people who are co-opted are co-opted as an individual, almost regardless of what body they belong to, or whether the body they belong to, for example, Sandwich and Bloom, can quite happily send someone instead of Carol George if she's sick or otherwise engaged.
Well, we didn't actually settle that issue. So it's a hybrid, I think that's the trend word. So I think probably we should focus on the individuals, but know which organisations they represent. That, you know, that they're in touch with what their network is and so on, and the kinds of issues that they're particularly interested in within the purview of Heritage and Townscape. Yes.
It should be possible then to say a given individual is the named person. If that person is not available, then someone else comes along. And like any member or observer of the public, if the committee wishes, they could consult them because they happen to be a member of Sandwich Environmental Conservation Group.
Yes, I'm not so sure.
I was going to ask if we could defer this till after the election, because I would like Councillor Heaven to be here as the Sandwich Environment Action Group, because he's got so much knowledge, especially the water base and everything, and it might be difficult tonight as he is now at the moment a councillor. And so I'd like...
Yes, I should.
So he can't, at the moment, he can't come on the committee as a co-opted. So I'd like to defer it after the election, so Councillor Heaven could come with us.
I shouldn't even be here.
Thank you.
Suggesting a way forward with that in mind, propose that we co-opt Carol George and Anne-Marie Hugan, and then third spot potentially after election, depending on his rank.
I couldn't hear what you said.
So propose that we co-opt in the meantime Carol George and Anne-Marie Hugan, and defer the third spot until after the election.
The third co-option is deferred altogether.
Defer until after the election.
After the election.
Yes, but I think we're pretty clear, aren't we, that we would like key heaven?
I don't know if we can do it, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Councillor Carter, you'll agree with this. I think the Joint Transportation Board, I think it's yourself and Councillor Fox, isn't it, that go. So if one can't go, the other can go.
That's correct.
So I think as a whole, we should, till Councillor Heaven can come in, is as the body, the environmental group as a body to be a co-opted member.
Or a representative.
Yes,
I think that's a good idea. So we agree, so the recommendation is that we co-opt Carol George, Anne-Marie Hugan, and a member of the Sandwich Environmental Conservation Group immediately. Okay?
No, that's not okay with me. What about the other people? Might
Well,
they reply?
No, two said no.
And who is the person thinking about it?
There is somebody who's thinking about it, but that would mean we'd have to go to a vote, and
Who is the person?
it's,
Is it Christina?
yes,
So I don't want those two people in front of Christina.
yes, and Christina's thinking about it.
Christina, think quickly.
No, I was just wondering actually whether you intended to go confidential on this item.
Shouldn't need to.
No? No, I mean it's up to you, but
Yeah, I don't want to say too much.
Well, okay, well let's decide to defer it until after the election.
After the election.
Okay, so we recommend to the council, we do have some names in the hat, but we recommend that we will defer that consideration until after the election. Okay. Councillor Wells?
Because I meant
All of them.
on the planning committee, the co-optees are organisations rather than individuals.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's a better arrangement because we know who they're representing
Yes.
rather than an individual.
Except that there is an individual who is unique in a way, who's amongst them. So, okay, we've done that.
Keith, let me do out there.
Why did he even go out?
Okay. So now,
Christina's sitting there filming us.
did you get all that?
Sorry about that.
After. So now we move to, if I can find it, the item 11, where we have to, it's recommended under Public Bodies Admissions Meetings Act, Admissions Meeting Act 1960, Section 1(2), the public and accredited representatives of newspapers be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 by virtue of the paragraph specified against the item. And the paragraph is information relating to a commercially confidential matter. So we need, who's going to propose that? Second. Can we